What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to take a look at what is possibly the most accessible a deck has ever been in Marvel Snap, because 3 cards in this deck are currently available in Spotlight caches. So as Marvel Snap's #1 free-to-play player, I felt like I had to at least showcase this deck a little bit. But it's got Caiera, Evolutionary, and then Nebula, which are all currently available in Spotlight caches, and then everything else in the deck is Series 3 or below. It's got Magik and She-Hulk from Series 3, Cosmo, Infinaut, Sunspot from Series 2, and then everything else is Series 1 stuff with no abilities that then get to unlock their potential with Evolutionary. So definitely wanted to showcase this deck a little bit. This first game is just like the basic game plan that this deck is trying to do, and then we'll get into some other fun clips. But if you're, I feel like most people know what this deck is trying to do. You are generally trying to play Magik so that way you can skip turn 6, sinking all of that power up into Sunspot, as well as Misty Knight and Cyclops. You've got a bunch of different ways to take advantage of skipping or not using all of your energy on turns, and then that allows you to play She-Hulk plus either a really big Infinaut or Hulk on the final turn of the game for 30 plus power that is also very difficult for your opponent to predict where that is heading. So here is, like I said, just a very basic game. My opponent gonna Iceman, a rock will gladly soak that up for us. And another cool thing, we can also get in under a goose, which is typically a way to stop a deck trying to dump a bunch of big cards. And then we're also playing, in addition to these really big cards, a bunch of really small cards, Misty Knight, Sunspot, and Nebula, and Caiera protects all of those, which makes it a really nice fit. I did want to cover one weakness that the deck does have that Caiera doesn't cover, so that way if you are playing this deck, you know to play around it, or if you're seeing this deck a lot and you want a good counter, you'll be aware. But that's basically just going to be changing Limbo on the final turn of the game with Storm or Scarlet Witch or Legion or Snowguard Hawk. Most of those things get answered by Cosmo, the last 2 don't, so those are even better. But yeah, something to watch out for when you're just skipping on turn 6. This is, I think, one of my favorite games with the deck, just because we get really great high-rolly locations. First of all, being Titan, which means that I don't even need Magik or Limbo. Now I can just skip turn 5, and then I'll be able to play multiple big cards on turn 6. I'm actually going to be able to play all of my big cards this game because of the 3rd location. But the deck does have this combo built into it as well with Shocker, so sometimes you don't need to rely on the locations. If you can get Shocker to land on any of the deck's big cards, She-Hulk, Hulk, or the Infinaut, then you can skip on turn 5 and then turn 6 play She-Hulk plus one of those other 2 big cards. But the 3rd location in this game winds up being a pretty good one for me, which is Castle Blackstone. And I'll admit, part of what makes it good for me is I think my opponent is a bot here because they don't battle for Castle Blackstone, which means I just get it and now I get to drop a Hulk on turn 4. And not only is it a turn 4 Hulk, but it's a turn 4 Hulk that cannot be Shang-Chi'd because of Caiera. So we're in a really great spot, and then I draw the She-Hulk, which means I can just skip turn 5. She-Hulk will be free. Infinaut will cost 5, but I'll be able to play it on turn 6, and I can just dump a ton of power on that final turn of the game. Wave is going to make things a little bit interesting because now I'm skipping a turn where my opponent gets to play something big. They also have Daredevil Sight, and they're gonna snap, but I'm gonna stay in it. I think that they won't be able to win both of these locations, and they're probably never going to win Castle Blackstone, so I just have to win one of these other 2 locations, and I'm sitting on 30 power in my hand. My opponent has a pretty good play, Jubilee into Ghost Rider into that Magneto, but that Magneto pulling Caiera into the center means that I can actually win that location pretty easily and effortlessly now with Infinaut. And like I said, I think I've already locked up Castle Blackstone. At that point, I will just play my She-Hulk into Titan because kind of like, why not, I figured. And from there, I've got two more choices. I can Nebula, soak up an additional power into Hulk and Misty Knight. Nebula is probably more power, but like I said, I don't think I'm losing Castle Blackstone. I don't think I'm losing Murder World. I don't think I'm losing any locations this game, to be totally honest, but I'm just gonna drop the Shocker into Titan. I guess I could definitely lose Titan. Yeah, I guess it's a tie because my opponent plays Odin there. So that location was close. We'll give my opponent that one, but we are able to grab a win in the other two locations. Here's another fun one. My opponent's Iron Lad hit Super Scroll. That's not going to do anything, but they've also Magiked for us, which is great. And when you are playing a deck that wants Limbo against another deck that wants Limbo, you're almost like disadvantaged to waste a turn playing Magik because then your opponent also gets it for free. And like in this scenario where I don't even have to waste a draw on Magik, I can now have a more consistent draw for my other cards to assemble my full combo. I'm gonna Cyclops into my Nebula location. They're a pretty great pair because Cyclops says, don't play here, while Nebula says, play here, so you kind of punish your opponent on both sides of the coin. And then turn 6, I'm gonna skip and snap. I've got She-Hulk and Infinaut, and we are set up to do our full combo thing. That's what I was saying, like, we don't have to waste one of our draws on Magik. So we are then able to be like more consistent with the rest of our cards. Not that I'm controlling my draws or anything, but my opponent plays the Living Tribunal on the penultimate turn of the game, which is partially why I think this is a fun one. If you are not already familiar with how to play around the Living Tribunal, basically what you want to do is build up your power in two locations. So Limbo, I could like technically win that location right now with She-Hulk, but I would actually lose the game if I did that, and you'll see why in just a second. So instead, I want to put my She-Hulk into a location where I already have the most power, because my opponent is going to get a bunch of power on the final turn here with Onslaught into that Iron Man. We're going to take him down a little bit again with the Cyclops kind of doing double duty against their Iron Man, but we are able to win in two locations because of that. So thought that was a sweet one as well. One thing I'm really not sure of is, should I get the comic cover, the Bronze Age variant for High Evolutionary? I have not pulled the trigger yet. I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm going to stick to my free-to-play guns here and just say I'd rather save the Spotlight cash for future cards. It's kind of awkward because like you get to see the High Evolutionary pop up at the start of each of your games, but your opponent like rarely sees it unless you make it your avatar or something, just because it's a card that is not frequently played. So yeah, not super important. This game I do get to Shocker onto my She-Hulk, which will allow me to fully combo out. I'm just going to play Nebula actually on this turn though, get the Nebula rolling as soon as possible, and then next turn I will play Shocker, and we'll actually get to make double use of the Shocker because we get to play it into a Sinister London. And then we've got all of the big cards here, so we'll have a lot of opportunities or options for which of these big cards we want to drop. And I thought this would be a fun one to end on here. My opponent's going to give me the Hood in Oscorp Tower, and we're going to give them a Shocker. So they're beating us currently, but this game's really just going to come down to who can make the most use of Sinister London. And we've got some pretty good options, because if we like draw any way to protect our cards too, then we can just drop a ton of power into Sinister London. Cyclops is also just like a really fantastic card here too. I'm hoping that my opponent plays 2 Sinister London here eventually, but then the plan is I can skip on turn 5, and this will be the combo that I just talked about. Skipping on turn 5 allows me to turn 6 play Infinaut plus She-Hulk, or She-Hulk plus Hulk. Either way, that's going to work out pretty well. My opponent plays Forge and Beast, so they'll be able to play a pretty big card into Sinister London this turn. Like I said, I think I'm just going to skip here, or maybe I didn't say this, but I do think I'm just going to skip here because that'll allow me to play Infinaut plus She-Hulk, which is just a little bit bigger than the Hulk right now. So we'll do that. My opponent still keeps me having priority, which is pretty smart. They play a Professor X, couldn't play that into Sinister London, but that is going to win them Oscorp Tower. So now things are a little bit tricky actually, because my opponent having priority means that I probably want to play Cosmo here actually, and Cosmo's a pretty great draw off the top that will actually just be my best play alongside She-Hulk. So did want to get in some Cosmo love. I do think it's an important card in the deck. It's probably like it's kind of like a backup Caiera, right? That can also stop some of your opponent's different potential ways to go over the top. It's not going to stop Onslaught plus Iron Man, but it'll stop different tech that your opponent might play. Like we'll see in this one, my opponent doesn't go for Shang-Chi, they go for Valkyrie, which also is not going to work against me here. So we will indeed snag the win and another 8-cube victory. That's going to be it for me today. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.